If you have been doing the work with the awakening of your central nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, your somatic nervous system, the same, and you've been connecting within the conscious field of both the ethers and the ley lines of Mother Earth, the same, this message is for you. I would say this message is more of a mirror to offer perspectives in case you find something similar of the nature of what happens when you start to align to your frequencies. Once your embodiment, your physical vessel, is no longer in combat or in struggle within the conscious field of your awakening, the same. And when you begin to integrate the cohesive network between your mind, body, spirit, all the same, you're going to disturb the natural false matrix and its harmonic way. You are going to disrupt, send off signals to the false matrix technologies that exist. The human beings that have been creating these technologies that keep you as far as data, that keep examining you, that keep tapping into your network to see where you are, who you are within your field, especially if you are one who is considered like the black sheep of not just the family, but you've graduated to being the black sheep of the system. Once you start to graduate from the internal and external warfare that has been happening since the beginning of time, once you start to see that you can't fight the war because then you become part or a product of the warfare that's actually feeding off of your nature. See, our nature is to be free, sovereign, and expansive the same. And within our collapsing nature, as we physically die, you would say in the 3D, that's also expanding within the spiritual network of the way we are starting to understand, at least when it comes to spiritual science. Means that you are now integrating the science that you know for yourself, not limited to the science that you learn from outside of the structure or the education systems, but you start to almost like neural network your inner knowing and with what you've been engendered to train within your outer school, being a person or a human being. As you start to align the frequency that you are and you start to see yourself as, well, not just as a receiver, but I'm going to say as a receiver so that I can actually get this message across and to give a perspective. Pay attention when you meditate. Pay attention when you start to operate at a certain frequency that I've said in past videos, when you are arriving to a meditative state of peace, tranquility, presence, but the unraveling of the nature that you've been walking with, or one would have been walking with, as to who you are not. Even if you haven't shed those aspects of you, but as you start to walk with, as you start to create a new pattern of not just existing and coexisting, but as many light workers would probably say in the New Age school, in the way that they think right now, I'm going to use such terminology because that's where a lot of people are waking up to, is that you begin to walk anointed, as some would say, chosen. But I would be weary at using such of a title, which is also an attempt to keep you congregated so that systems can start to tag you and label you and to see how you are actually progressing as a collective within the trend of new ages, as we are collapsing the trends of old schools as if they were nothing. And now how I speak, and I speak as I am a chosen one to my family. And I don't mean just simply my bloodline, but I mean the entire blueprint as how I chose to incarnate here. I personally would just say I am a collective process, a human process that is engendering my birthright to remember my ancient self. When that occurs, pay attention to the helicopters. Pay attention to airplanes. One of the first signals that you are starting to morph into a higher dimensional process within the state, within your conscious state, and also within your nervous system field, you begin to emit a frequency that disturbs the peace that is being fed by the false matrix, the false light that is in coherence with resonating fields that, let's say myself, I can no longer tolerate. That's why there was a fly there, because I start to disturb, as I speak, I start to disturb the presence of what does not want to of what does not want to be disturbed. They want you to flow within the system. So it's not the fly that is disturbing me. Yes, it is. I'm not that crazy yet. It's not just the mosquitoes, because they are the first test. They're the first test to see how your nervous system will comply or to collapse into the lower density field to attempt to upset you, as an attempt to create homeostatic electricity, meaning static electricity, so that you can stagnate as to the acting potential of what you're engendering or seeking to create, such as me, myself, within this conversational field right now. As I'm creating it, there are going to be fields of technology using nature to disrupt my pattern, or your pattern the same. You don't have to necessarily be walking with a camera and speaking out loud, but when you start to speak out loud and you are in a state of comprehension within yourself and your outside field, in the present, in the moment, and in vivo, but not simply that, you start to begin to engender a state of being transparent, allowing your nervous system to now flow and to engender a free space, so that your soul can engender a state of being free to move in a nature that's within your blueprint. And that's why now I have a bee that's hovering around. Maybe the bee is a little stage fright, so she doesn't want to show herself on the camera. But the mosquitoes and the flies, they tend to not care. It has been in my observation for about 1.5 years that as I've been traveling to places such as the Amazon in Ecuador, the United States, Arizona, and the East Coast, such as New Jersey, through pattern recognition and receiving data that took me a while to piece it together and to be able to appropriate a conversation with a knowing and feeling safe and stable that this is actually a piece of knowledge that is ancient, that is being unraveled to me as I'm speaking. I'll give you an example. I was training at this particular park, and I tend to choose different locations based on where I'm led to and how I feel and how I resonate. And for all of you grid workers, you already know, oftentimes you're led to go to the desert, you're led to go to the jungle, you're led to go to the mountains or to your local park. And your existence, it's what's remembering Mother Earth, because Mother Earth is remembering you. Meaning that as you become conscious of yourself and her the same, and you become conscious of all beings that are around you, surrounding you, observing you, or remote viewing you, and as that starts to happen, there's a fly in my finger, hello. As that starts to happen, you make peace within the nature of what is happening. You no longer fight the fight. You start to unravel that nature, even within their chaotic state, even as remote viewers begin to show their conscious field towards you, and the fly starts to work within that frequency, right? It becomes now my eyes, literally, right? Where about an hour ago, there were a whole bunch of mosquitoes that were attempting to take me off of my training as I started to, or began to purge a lot of like the lymphatic buildup from being in a very dense field with where I'm at presently, which doesn't align with my nervous system when it comes to my levels of peace and tranquility. However, I am refining, I'm galvanizing within the system. Do I like it? No, I don't like it. If you give me $1 million right now, I have a 1,000-acre piece of land right now as we speak. I don't have that right now. So it means that I'm not right now. My higher self is not allowing me to limit myself to 1,000 acres of land, but to realize that all of the land serves my highest good, as I serve my highest good for all of the land wherever I'm at, wherever I'm led to in the moment. It would be challenging for someone who is working within a 2D or a 3D state of presence within rationality, and within the state of thinking, seeking proof, seeking validation through scripture, seeking validation through science. They are both the same fields of one who works within the lower construct of their mind. My past two videos go in depth with that. But the nature of this video is that once you come to not just peace, but you come into your own inner technology of when you're being observed, of when you're being remote viewed, of when you are being tapped in by very ancient technologies of actual humans. I'm not even going to speak about extraterrestrials, because they are in contract with many beings that are ancient so that they can receive data information so that humans can awaken through the false light, right? Forgetting that your embodiment, one's embodiment, has the entire blueprint of the awakening of your DNA codes, very specific to my last video. Helicopters emit a certain frequency. Airplanes emit a certain frequency due to their technology of existing, and technologies emitting false frequencies that are not natural to our nervous system. Now, I can't prove it out loud as to, I see a resonance that they also carry certain frequencies, and I'm not sure if the actual pilots know this, but there are frequencies of technology within transmission, as far as like radio frequencies, that change the resonance through sound and vibration of a collective territory and area. And yes, that's already in the DOD, that's already in the government. They already have that within military strategies. How do you think they test that? They test that on everyday people who are not aware. So for them to successfully test it, they can't allow me to be kind of like what you would say is a whistleblower. I'm not the whistleblower, because there are many, many more high-tech and more qualified people that speak on this and in depth, and they actually prove and provide actual paperwork from like the CIA. So I'm like a fly in their eyes, but I'm pestering them like a fly would pester me. And they're kind of like pestering me a little bit. Every single time that I arrive to a certain frequency of vibration, as I start to expand my inner knowing in the moment within my meditative state, whether I'm doing a qigong or whether I'm sitting still with or without hape, and I start to tap in, no different than when one is tapping into their sleepy state when they're about to fall asleep, but being completely conscious and awakened, in case you've never meditated. Once you start to open up the subconscious field of your reality, it starts to hover and start to integrate within your conscious field. The challenge for a lot of people, and myself, most of my life, is that the nervous system with conditioning starts to engender what is safe, what is secure, right? So we start to think that there are demonic forces that makes us sleepy or lazy. And yes, that's a real big thing, but it's more the conditioning oftentimes, especially if you've been doing the work for years, right? That will emit a certain frequency because it will feel like it's actual work to arrive at a state that's supposed to be stable. So what's not stable is the miscommunication between your conscious field of your inner knowing, the heart that you are, and your embodiment. So once you become in complete cohesive nature and in alignment, the discipline that you seek or the discipline that you're working with becomes aligned. And if you have 2 or 3 different disciplines, and one may seem like it has nothing to the other, it still becomes aligned because you start to becoming conscious as to why you've had these disciplines and that you're working with them. Now, when there's a discipline that no longer serves your highest good, such as you're working and exchanging your time for money because you need to pay your bills, well, guess what? Your highest self is going to collapse that. And oftentimes that's when you start to have this tower moment and you think it's like evil coming at you. And yeah, when you start to place attention, you start thinking that you will attract that frequency and it will expand that way. But that's neither good or bad. It's going to actually expand and to speed up this great collapse. But then you're fighting it like I did. You start fighting it and you start saving your practice like I was doing. And I found myself like in hell with that. And I found myself in military strategies and military warfare. I became the commander of this war of attempting to keep this 1,000 square foot 3 treatment room clinic up in New Jersey for acupuncture, and I've been working with it for 10 years. But the insurance game started to change, and I realized that it was not so much because the insurance game started to change is where I started to make a lot less money. It's that I was relying on the false nature of how money is supposed to be interchanged when you are aligning to, let's say, such as myself, particular to me, for your highest good and for my highest good the same. So as I start to expand my inner knowing, my outside macroscopic environment needed to match that. So that means that money needed to come from the actual person with their blessing, not from an insurance company. I know that sounds a little crazy, but believe me, I've been in this insurance game for quite enough time to be able to come to a sense of an agreeable consensus as to that I made peace with this knowing, because once I released that, it didn't bring my practice back to life. It collapsed, right? The money I was making on a good year, I was making over $200,000 a year. I mean, I don't even care, right? I'm just saying that I wasn't making small money. For me, that was a lot of money growing up very poor, growing up living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, never having a car, never having cable, right? Having to pay for my first hoopty of a ride at 19 from working at UPS. You feel what I'm saying? I had to do everything on my own. So that's in complete gratitude. I'm grateful to that. And do I make that kind of a money today? No, because now I'm not serving a system that doesn't serve my highest good. So I'm kind of like coming out of this great reset of something new that's being engendered, and I would not be speaking on that aspect on camera right now, as it's becoming known to me. And once it becomes clear to me, then there's nothing to speak about. I'll just be living that moment. And as far as how finances will begin to structure in a free sense, because my nature is free in a sense. Back on topic is that helicopters, airplanes begin to hover around you when you start to reach a certain frequency. And I found myself, it started to become consistent, very consistent. And I found myself in Quito, Ecuador, and I started to see helicopters there. But when I went to the jungle, when you don't see any planes, I would see a helicopter there. About 3 weeks ago, there were like 4 black choppers that started to hover and started to make itself even more conscious to me, almost around my head. It started to make circles around me, not like that, but within my vicinity, and it was pretty close. I actually took a video of it when they were about to leave, and I don't know, it's just too much to try to catch something in vivo, and that energy just like, it didn't feel constructive for me, so I stopped doing that. Because I'm like, who am I trying to prove to anyone? It's the whole point is that if this is happening to you, then this is why I'm creating this message. What I'm starting to see is that am I elevating to a certain field of protection, because it became very aware to me that I started to expand as I started to become connected to the fabric of both the light from within, but intermingled with the false light. Because the whole point is that as things collapse, they collapse because you become the spider, like Spider-Man. Not because of the movie, but the movie's coming out in divine timing, so that people pay attention to the action heroes outside of themselves, right? Is that everything is a web interweaved, and the technologies that's in physics, it's in chemistry, they know this. They understand that there's web-like technology that's very intelligent, and they do use that technology to build when they're attempting to work with nature, and when they're also trying to understand how nature works, but they still don't understand how nature works. They are, but it's based on schools that are teaching them, and those schools are actual interdimensional extraterrestrial beings that actually know, as we are supposed to know. So the difference is that they don't want us to know at their capacity. Why? Because they know that then we can see them eye to eye, and they lose their capacity to live in this state. Why is that happening? It's because all of them, almost everyone outside of you, they are not living and in resonance with the harmony of how Mother Earth and the sun is expanding. Anything that's great here has to die. That's what we were taught. You live, you work, you retire, and then you die. That construct is what's dying. So you can die with that construct, but it begins with a level of education. You would start to see possibilities of seeing different constructs, so that you can realize that you are governing a creation of all these systems based on belief, and to a certain point of a knowing that you can drive your car if you make enough money, and nobody can stop you to drive your car as long as you follow all the rules and you don't break the laws and you have a license and yada yada yada. You feel what I'm saying? So then you have the state of freedom. But the state of freedom is always going to be within the illusion that has been manifested as a reality that we're supposed to abide and live by. Now you have Puerto Rico, right? And it was happening, and it's happening in other parts of the Caribbean, but now the news is actually reporting that it's just Puerto Rico now. And now they're without water, an entire island without water, right? The whole point is not to fight the government. The whole point is to realize that the government is supposed to collapse with the false illusion. If you keep voting for the government, what are you doing? You're actually selling your soul to say that I am going to be able to drink water once the government starts to change the laws. What the fuck is that? Excuse my language, but what the fuck is that? What is that? Air is free. Water is free. Your embodiment is free. It's free to be born here. It's free to die. It's free to go to jail if you want to break a law. And if that law didn't exist, it's free to probably get killed or to be placed in jail by humanity because you broke a law within the community. As an example, you have the freedom to make these decisions. You may not have the freedom to exercise what the outcome is going to be in return. And that's why most of us are here to realize that we're not just children. We are here to see how energy becomes manipulated. In the beginning, you must manipulate energy. I manipulate energy so that we understand how we are being coerced, how we can expand, how we can collapse systems. But once you master the art of manipulating energy, then you become one with the energy that you're attempting to manipulate. When you become in complete union with yourself, with your nervous system, with your divine counterparts, that they're telling us that we are in separation because we have different genetic experiences, as I'm a man and you're a woman, versus coming to peace that we have different structures of like an alpha male, a beta male, or alpha omega male, or a female who has compassion or a female who doesn't. When one is able to work in synchronicity with all of these aspects of what I'm saying, then you start to understand sound and resonance. You start to understand how energy works, and you start understanding how one walks enlightened. And you can also understand that sound, resonance, and frequency can actually dwindle and make your light small. And you could also see that some people forgot how to turn on their inner quadrant, their inner elixir of being the light that generates from within. So they start to needing or requiring for you to be the light. And that's like almost like a narcissistic relationship. And it's happening now, right? Profoundly so, because it's a system of many systems that are collapsing. Why? Because Big Brother out there, right? It's not a human being that's possessing this entire world. It's a sick masculine right now. It's a very sick, narcissistic viejo that we incarnated into the mind of a system that's being run by the most perverse sense of narcissism. So women and men, but you're starting to see it more strongly with women, they're actually engendering a pattern, and they may not be conscious of it, that they are absorbing it. The whole point is that they are absorbing these experiences so that they can collapse it within their system. Some of them have to physically die to collapse it within the system, because they may, most of us may be healing an entire ancestral curse that has been plagued for hundreds of thousands of years within our human evolution, making it feel like it was only 7 generations. It wasn't 7 generations. It was a lot longer for many of us ancient beings. And that's why they're attacking lands such as Puerto Rico, such as Jamaica, such as Cuba, such as Haiti. Well, actually the Haitians are like saying, well, y'all gonna need us pretty soon, because we already know we cracked the code to much level. So that's why people are afraid to go to Haiti. But Haiti has something of the elixir of the Antichrist to the false light. Oh, right? But too many people too busy judging that they're being classified by being religious. And I'm not saying it's not a horrible place, but when you go to the heart of very horrible places, most people judge, but the ones that know, that need to reset, that need to purge, tend to go there, because it is the actual cesspool of where there's no judgment once you come to peace of being in that low vibratory field, in a place that nobody wants to go, and you find yourself healing in profound ways. But healing means nothing if you do not obtain your ancient remembrances. And when you do that, you can walk on all lands when there's a calling, when your heart is aligned to. When you do that, and you find yourself in that frequency, when it doesn't matter what anybody outside this camera or outside my voice when I speak sees differently, because I will not hold judgment on you. If you do, I will actually listen to you if I feel like it, if I'm led to, because there's something for me to hear as far as your perspective of me, because I'm just speaking a truth, not the truth that I need to hug, but a truth that I will release and let go today. And if that truth keeps coming back at me and keeps coming back to me, and it shows consistently, then it becomes the waters that I'm swimming in right now. But we don't just swim, we also fly. Like the Marines would say, we don't die, we rise, semper fi, right? And I say that often. I didn't join the military, but I wanted to join the Marines when I was young. And I mean, my name has half of the Marines. It's Mar, M-A-R, as in Marcus. And Mars is the planet of what? Of war. It was a remembrance for me that I didn't need to join the military in this life path to be at war with myself or with others. This is not a judgment call, it's a graduation. There comes a point where one requires, after they graduate from being a soldier, a wooden soldier. Actually, in my last video, I spoke about the 3 levels. There's the wooden soldier phase where your mind is teaching your body. The second phase is when your body's teaching your mind, right? Most people fall in love with just phase number 1. And then phase 3 is the book of mysticism. It's actually when you start to encode your hidden blueprint that now starts to engender from the inside out. And then you start attracting people that may reflect that lesson. So it's not always you to you. It's not always me to me. Quite commonly, yes. But then it could be a human being. It could be a person in the street that's homeless, right? That might be on drugs. And they're going to issue me a conversation. And I might not be in the mood to hear it. But my subconscious mind said, you need to listen right now, because they came in your conscious field for a reason. As soon as I offer that space for them and me, and I make that decision, let's say, as an example, because this is a real thing for me, then something magical happens within that phase, within that conversation. They give me information that I needed and I required, and they may not be aware, but their subconscious mind and the subconscious field of the human oversoul, meaning the human collective, is still a version of me out there. That human being is a version of me out there doing what I am not longer required to do. And that's to what? To knock myself out of this reality, because I hate it so much. I hate myself so much, and I need to check out. And that might be the way that person's checking in. That person's wise, but they're taught to now see and to beat themselves up because society did not help them heal their nervous system. The divine matriarchy has sickened because of the sick patriarchy, at least in this wave or in this time around, because the roles were reversed in a past reality, which was the fall of Atlantis, right? The closest to the most harmonious times were Lemuria, and nobody wants to talk about that. That was the attempt of the divine union between masculine and feminine to realize that we're two ends of the same coin. So putting all this together, when you start to comprehend your levels of comprehension and your nervous system begins to make peace of that, you begin to emit new light codes of conversation. What happens? You're going to set off technologies of alarms, and you're going to see well, in my example, and I want to know if maybe you guys are experiencing something of this nature, they tend to be helicopters. So this was what happened today. And this is not the first time, but it's the first time that I was able to see something so that I can actually stabilize this inner understanding, and now my inner workings can now be expressed outwardly. That is called, within the old Kung Fu texts and in traditional Chinese medicine, it's the inner dragon can no longer be within his or her shell. They have to express out. The inner dragon is actually the ley lines of Mother Earth that's alive. So they attribute it to that of the human language of dragon. A lot of humans are falling in love with that, so they tend to fall within that and just say, I'm just a dragon all day. But you are all species and none of them at the same time. It depends what vessel you're walking in. Right now you're a human working with a lower density field than a dragon. A dragon is interdimensional. Human is just saying, I'm just 2D experiencing 3D. Basically 2D projected into the 3D, right? So the dragons are not, and I said this in the last video, but I didn't say dragons, but the dragons are not cracking jokes on you. We're cracking jokes on them. We're at war with them, right? It is not the dragons that are disturbing our peace. It is us who begins to coerce the peace when we start to see other species, other beings, other levels of understanding that falls out of alignment within your indoctrination. Because you're the doctor at that, or you're the pastor at that, you're the priest at that. You're highly Catholic, or you're highly Buddhist, right? Or you're an alpha man, and when I speak, you gotta listen. Or you're a free woman where now all men have to serve you because that is the rising of the matriarchy. I call bullshit on all of that, straight up. It's more profound, it's deeper than that. And why would you hold yourself to those stupid limitations at this point? I feel like Krishnamurti would have said that. He would have been angry, and he would have just called everybody stupid. So I just tapped into him for a second. So as I said a couple weeks ago, it was 4 choppers that were hovering around me. Today, I saw one helicopter at a different park within seconds. Once I reach and arrive at a certain vibratory state, that now I see the exact state of harmonics that I emanate, because I understand my somatic nervous system, and my somatic nervous system understands the same frequency of that if when you're driving a car, right? Or when you're playing a sport. Once you hone into that ability from the discipline, and now you become in alignment with that discipline, right? Now you could play ball. It's no longer you paying attention to the basketball or the baseball and the ball. You're seeing now in a new light, because now you become one and you merge within that vehicle. You do it with cars, you do it with sports, you do it in relationships, right? But we are taught and indoctrinated to say we can't do that with our soul and our embodiment. Ooh, that's taboo, right? That's like whatever. You could form a cross and then you could maybe display it upside down. When you start to permeate, not judge, permeate the bullshit, and you start to see the bullshit as just frequency that maybe I was emanating and attracting because I wasn't becoming aware of, that the truth is that once I become aware, it starts to attract and come to my attention. So what happens is that this particular frequency, one of many, is that there were birds around me, there were squirrels around me. Squirrels put themselves in a Qigong stance all the time with me when I'm training. It's a true story. I try to take pictures, but they then I get myself out of the frequency when I take the picture, and then the squirrel runs, right? So they're holding a stance with me once in a while, and so here I am humming with them, right? And then I start going and tapping into the deeper somatic sense, for most of you who would understand that, where you start to hone in to both the dark and the light nature, because you're actually bringing something in towards your core so that you can emanate a new sense or a new light within your light of a conscious field that's being unraveled as far as this experience is concerned when I practice my Qigong, right? As in this example, as in today. Soon as I arrive there, helicopter comes really close to me. And 1 minute later, a whole bunch of mosquitoes out of nowhere, all of a sudden, starts to attack and bother me, to a point where they go in my eyeballs, they're everywhere. Then I started to go into my calisthenics, and yeah, I started to get bothered at some point. At first, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. Go into my Zen. Another aspect is like, let me start killing them, which I don't like to do. But I said to myself, if I start doing that, it's just not going to stop, because they were all over the place. And once I started to not make peace with them, but I started to become conscious of the connection between the helicopters, changing the complexity of this density field. When they came here, they know the actual frequencies that will actually disturb and disrupt the peace of Mother Earth. And the mosquitoes and the flies are here to attempt to harmonize by showing and making conscious the imbalance of a certain frequency that one may not want to practice Qigong near. So they know that, right? So within nature, if I went to a trail, I would know where not to train my Qigong. There's a tree or a habitat there energetically. It might be entities, who knows, of mosquitoes. And you'll see the mosquitoes or flies that are there. Am I going to go in there in that bed and train under them? No, I start to see that in its natural habitat. I'll find my natural habitat where my nervous system is going to align to the part of the earth where we're both speaking to each other, where we're going to meet at the park and dance together and have wine and dinner together or lunch, right? Like a picnic. That's the whole point. It becomes fun. But this case, it becomes intrusive and invasive. The true parasite are the entities that are working in contract with the collective, where it may not be conscious to the pilot, but now this false parasite, like almost like this robotic parasite that is in the form of an airplane or most likely a helicopter is going to come and to emit a certain field very strategically, because again, this is neurological warfare, and warfare for your mind, for your conscious field, so that you do not expand. But lo and behold, that when you are understanding how to expand, naturally speaking, it's because you also know how they're actually creating a frequency to bring you back down to your lower frequency. So once you become the true observer, no matter how bothered you are, and no matter how they attempt to get you off this course within your actual strategy for that day, because that will upset somebody such as myself, because my discipline is that I have a schedule for that, right? Is that is part of the training of Kung Fu. Now I'm not any longer being the one that is like Neo from the Matrix, who's trying to stop the bullets and stop the flies. I'm more like the Oracle. I'm more like the female who says, well, seek from within, ask the question, why is it that she's the one who's actually observing Neo and every character in that movie, and she's the one who's actually observing and allowing the stage to change and morph. It's the Oracle that nobody pays attention to. Once you start to observe your environment and you start to seek new observation and new levels of comprehension within yourself, then you become conscious. Then your enlightened self starts to emit light to where you become conscious, and it starts to hone in. It starts to hone in, and it starts to hone in. That frequency becomes more pristine and precise. As soon as that happened, the mosquitoes all disappeared. And then the birds started to come back near me. So now it becomes a lesson of the simulation of the false light that's very real. They are tactical, and they are here to engender and to take control of your vessel, because according to the false light, your vessel doesn't belong to you. Your vessel belongs to God. But they created that God for you to observe and to pray to. Source, God exists. I'm not saying he doesn't. What I'm saying is that they are painting a picture and a canvas for you to exist in, and to say this is the God that you're supposed to serve within this serving system, within this system, this network of a server. And by nature, we serve humanity. We serve with compassion, with love, and it can mean that you're actually putting a lot of work and effort into helping the homeless and feeding the poor. But where are the flies when you're doing that? Pay attention, my friends. I love you, man. Woman.